In the year 2139, Earth's scientific and technological advancements had reached an inflection point. Faster than light travel had been achieved only 3 years prior, opening the doors to the stars and igniting hopes of cosmic fraternity. When the first signals from a structured alien civilization were intercepted, a cautious but ambitious plan was set into motion. The newly formed United Terran Council authorized the Athena Initiative, a diplomatic mission comprised of scientists, linguists, military observers, and politicians tasked with representing humanity to what they believed was a peaceful interstellar federation. The mission launched with great ceremony and universal fanfare. For the first time, humanity would speak not as nations, but as a species. The target of this mission was the Thal'Zor Imperium, a conglomerate of alien races unified under a rigid, hierarchical system that had lasted for thousands of years. Their message had seemed welcoming, even eager, for Earth to present itself before the throne of harmony. While the phrase struck some Earth linguists as vaguely ominous, the consensus was that it was a ceremonial way of saying, "Join us in peace." After a journey of 9 weeks through folded space, the Athena delegation arrived at the designated star system and were brought aboard a massive orbital station, half city, half cathedral, looming in orbit above the Thal'Zor homeworld. The initial encounter was visually stunning, surreal even. Dozens of species moved with practiced grace, all following an unspoken social choreography. At the center of the proceedings stood the Thal'Zor High Speaker, a being over 10 feet tall, cloaked in living silk and flanked by guards who resembled crystalline giants. Through advanced translation protocols, the humans began their introductions, led by Ambassador Regan, a Cole, a veteran diplomat known for de-escalating the Pacific water crisis and the Mars-Titan resource accords. Her words were measured, warm, and brimming with the hope of cooperation. But as the dialogue unfolded, it became clear that Earth's assumptions about the invitation had been wrong, fatally so. The Thal'Zor did not invite Earth as a peer, but as a vassal. Their federation was not a union of equals, but an empire maintained through assimilation and submission. When Regan, a Cole, declined the offer to swear Earth's loyalty to the throne of harmony, stating that humanity sought mutual respect and independent coexistence, the mood in the chamber shifted dramatically. The High Speaker paused, then declared Earth untamed and in need of enlightenment. It was not a declaration of war, not overtly, but every human present felt the weight of threat behind the words. The tension reached a boiling point during a ceremonial exchange of artifacts. As a gesture of goodwill, Earth had brought a centuries-old compass recovered from the bottom of the Atlantic, a symbol of human exploration. In response, the Thal'Zor offered a relic that, unbeknownst to the humans, signified fealty and servitude in their culture. When Ambassador Cole declined to kneel as part of the exchange ritual, the High Speaker's guards interpreted the act as blasphemy. Within seconds, chaos erupted. A force field shimmered to life, separating the human delegation from the chamber. Blades of light materialized in the hands of alien guards. In the confusion, gunfire broke out. Whether by human defense or alien aggression is still debated. When the smoke cleared, 2 members of the Earth delegation and a high-ranking Thal'Zor priest were dead. The diplomatic mission had collapsed. The Athena ship barely escaped the system, limping home with a fractured hull and a blood-stained banner. The galactic message was clear. Earth would not bow, and the stars would burn because of it. What was meant to be a moment of historic unity had become the match that lit the fuse for Earth's first war among the stars. When news of the failed diplomatic mission reached Earth, shock turned swiftly into fear. The Thal'Zor Imperium broadcast a galaxy-wide edict labeling humanity as rogue primitives, declaring that the species had rejected harmony and must be corrected through force. The Thal'Zor fleet, immense and ancient, began its mobilization. Dozens of subject worlds pledged resources, fleets, and troops. Earth's colonies on Mars, Titan, and Europa scrambled to prepare, but the sheer scale of the threat seemed insurmountable. Humanity stood alone, outnumbered, outgunned, and politically isolated. Many feared extinction was not just possible, it was likely, yet in the shadow of annihilation, something extraordinary happened. For the first time in recorded history, the fractured nations of Earth spoke with a single voice. The United Terran Council, once a symbolic forum for intergovernmental dialogue, transformed into the command structure for a planetary defense initiative. Petty disputes were shelved. Borders became irrelevant. A species-wide survival instinct kicked in, and with it came a fervor that no alien empire could have anticipated. Billions of minds turned toward one goal, resisting the Imperium. Humanity's technological disadvantage was obvious. The Thal'Zor had been spacefaring for millennia. Their ships were larger, faster, and equipped with weaponry far beyond anything Earth had developed. But where Earth lacked in firepower, it compensated with creativity, urgency, and an unmatched capacity for improvisation. Military engineers repurposed asteroid mining lasers into kinetic weapons. Civilian fusion reactors were converted into mobile power stations. Agricultural drones were retrofitted with electromagnetic pulse devices. Hackers across the globe began working together, forming anonymous coalitions to probe and exploit alien data systems. The ingenuity wasn't confined to Earth. The Martian colonies, long known for their resilience, transformed their underground habitats into fortress networks. The miners of Phobos engineered railgun platforms from obsolete cargo lifters. On Titan, where thick methane oceans posed a challenge to any kind of construction, engineers used the cryogenic environment to create stealth submarines capable of launching from under the ice. Even the orbital junk surrounding Earth, once a symbol of negligence, became a deadly field of debris traps that claimed dozens of Thal'Zor vessels. It wasn't just innovation that defined the human response. It was sheer adaptability. The Thal'Zor, structured and orderly to a fault, adhered to centuries-old doctrines of warfare. They did not account for guerrilla tactics, decentralized command structures, or the psychological unpredictability of human resistance. They expected humans to defend major cities and centralized military installations. Instead, Earth responded with dispersed, mobile units and deception strategies. False signal beacons drew fleets into ambushes. Civilian vessels feigned surrender only to detonate at close range. Entire city populations vanished underground, living in silence for weeks until the enemy passed. More than once, a single human ship, piloted by a crew of barely trained civilians, managed to outmaneuver or outwit an entire alien flotilla. Victory wasn't always won with superior firepower, but with recklessness and the audacity to do what no algorithm-driven admiral would expect. Stories of these improbable triumphs spread across the stars. Human propaganda delivered via hijacked communication satellites broadcast tales of defiance, courage, and stubborn survival to occupied worlds. For the first time, the subject species of the Imperium began to question the myth of Thal'Zor invincibility. Even within the enemy ranks, admiration began to grow. Captured Thal'Zor soldiers often expressed confusion, and even awe at humanity's refusal to submit in the face of overwhelming odds. They could not understand how a species so young, so fragmented, had the capacity to unify under existential threat, and fight not for glory or empire, but for the simple, unyielding right to choose its own future. The war had begun with a belief that Earth would be crushed quickly, efficiently, and without complication. Instead, the Thal'Zor found themselves mired in a conflict unlike any they had fought in centuries. The humans, imperfect, chaotic, and impossibly determined, were not falling, they were rising, and they were learning. As the war escalated, the galaxy began to understand that humanity's true strength wasn't just in weapons or tactics. It was in something less tangible, harder to quantify, and infinitely more potent: the human spirit. That spirit, forged through millennia of survival, revolution, catastrophe, and reinvention, manifested in ways the Thal'Zor Imperium and its vassal species had never encountered. The Imperium operated on order, protocol, and predictability. Humanity brought chaos, emotion, and culture. The Imperium had fleets. Humanity had fire in its blood. What shook the galaxy most wasn't Earth's growing ability to strike back. It was the way humans fought, not just with their bodies or machines, but with their stories, their memories, their art, and their ideals. When Terran troops landed on occupied moons or defended asteroid colonies, they didn't just build bunkers, they painted murals on their walls. Soldiers in exo-armor would blast ancient rock ballads through loudspeakers mid-combat. Platoons carried flags stitched from remnants of old Earth nations and flew them together. Drones dropped pamphlets filled with poetry over Thal'Zor staging grounds. The invaders, bred for obedience and clarity of purpose, couldn't make sense of it. Who were these beings that mixed war with passion, death with beauty? On every front, Earth's culture became a weapon of resistance. A lone musician on a space station under siege uploaded a violin solo to the enemy's intercepted channels. It went viral among alien youth, many of whom had never heard something so hauntingly imperfect. An underground broadcast, Voice of Terra, sent out daily messages of hope, unity, and defiance. It became so widespread that even Thal'Zor soldiers began tuning in, not out of duty, but out of curiosity. Through music, spoken word, and desperate creativity, humanity began infecting the rigid order of the Imperium with doubt. Human emotional depth, seen by some alien cultures as a liability, became a force multiplier. Soldiers fought not because they were told to, but because they believed. They fought for families, for futures, for songs and stories that had yet to be written. When a small resistance cell was cornered on the icy plains of Juno's third moon, they transmitted a farewell message, not of military significance, but a dramatic reading of Shakespeare's Henry V. The Thal'Zor commander reportedly paused his assault to listen. The humans still perished, but their words spread, shared among both allies and enemies. Earth's unpredictability turned into its deadliest asset. The Imperium, long used to enemies who either submitted or followed known resistance patterns, couldn't comprehend the illogical bravery of humans who refused to retreat when survival seemed impossible. They couldn't understand why humanity would sabotage its own orbital elevator just to prevent its capture, or why commanders would choose total self-destruction to inspire others to fight. Such decisions defied all their centuries of warfare doctrine. Civilians were no less defiant. On occupied Earth territories, resistance movements formed organically. Elderly citizens ran misinformation networks. Children built decoys out of scrap metal. Entire cities staged blackouts and silent protests, disrupting Thal'Zor surveillance. In one case, a rural town coordinated an acoustic illusion using wind instruments and reverberating walls to simulate the arrival of an Earth fleet, forcing a Thal'Zor detachment to retreat. These weren't just acts of survival, they were acts of defiance, of identity. The spirit of Earth became legend. To the Imperium, it was a problem that couldn't be modeled or suppressed. To humanity, it was a rallying cry. It meant never giving in, even when logic said to surrender. It meant turning sorrow into song, defeat into myth, and memory into ammunition. The war was no longer just about territory. It was about existence. The Thal'Zor fought to maintain order. Humanity fought to prove that freedom, in all its messy, emotional, glorious imperfection, was worth every drop of blood. And in the eyes of many across the galaxy, Earth was winning, not just the war, but the soul of the stars. As the war dragged on, it became clear that it was no longer just a military conflict. It was a clash of civilizations, a battle between two opposing visions of what life among the stars should be. The Thal'Zor Imperium stood as the embodiment of order, tradition, and uniformity. For millennia, it had imposed its vision of harmony on hundreds of species, bringing them under a single banner of centralized control. Dissent was considered disorder, autonomy, a dangerous indulgence. Peace, in the Imperium's view, was achieved only through submission to structure. To them, humanity represented an infection, a chaotic anomaly that could either be absorbed or destroyed. But Earth didn't want to be absorbed. Humanity had been shaped by contradiction, by both cooperation and rebellion, by both unity and conflict. Where the Imperium saw disarray, humans saw freedom. Where the Imperium demanded stability, humans embraced risk. And where the Imperium sought to quiet the noise of individuality, humanity turned up the volume. The war became a test not just of endurance, but of belief, an ideological war played out in blood, fire, and broadcast frequencies. Humanity's message was simple: we will not be ruled. Through hacked communications, pirate radio, and underground holograms smuggled across star systems, Earth's resistance began to push a different narrative. They didn't just appeal to fellow humans, they spoke to the galaxy. In every occupied system, they seeded their message. Life has meaning because it is free to choose. You do not have to bow. You do not have to conform. You can resist. These broadcasts, often carried out at great risk, reached more than human ears. Subject races within the Imperium began to whisper, then question, then hope. The rebellion of Earth became a spark, a symbol. The Thal'Zor command structure underestimated the power of belief. They had grown so used to compliance that they failed to recognize the slow unraveling of their authority. Alien species who had quietly endured the Imperium's rule for centuries now began to observe Earth's defiance with wonder. If a species as young, scattered, and flawed as humanity could rise against impossible odds, what excuse did they have for submission? Resistance movements formed in hidden pockets across the Imperium. Some shared resources with human forces, others sabotaged Imperium infrastructure from within. A few even defected outright, flying under a new banner, a simple image of a human fist gripping a broken chain backlit by a star. Humanity's greatest weapon wasn't a ship or a bomb. It was its capacity to dream out loud, and to make others dream with it. When the Thal'Zor deployed fear, Earth responded with hope. When the Imperium enforced silence, humanity created noise, joyful, angry, defiant noise. Songs, speeches, manifestos, jokes told in 10 languages, graffiti on captured walls that read, "We are chaos, and we are coming." They turned the tools of oppression into canvases. Even when cities fell, they left behind messages that echoed through ruins, not of despair, but of determination. A pivotal moment came when the Thal'Zor captured an Earth Command ship and demanded a broadcast of surrender from its surviving captain. Instead, they received a live transmission of the captain reciting excerpts from humanity's philosophical and revolutionary history. Martin Luther King Jr., Malcolm X, Sojourner Truth, Mandela, Ada Lovelace, Carl Sagan, Emma Goldman, before detonating the ship with all hands, taking out half the fleet in the process. That broadcast was recorded. It was replayed on thousands of alien worlds. It didn't just show courage, it showed conviction. Earth's war was no longer just about survival. It had become the galaxy's first ideological war in centuries, a war of self-determination versus control, chaos versus order, the soul versus the system. And in that battlefield of ideas, humanity was not just fighting. It was leading to some that was terrifying, to many more it was liberating. The Earth that entered the war was still fragmented, scarred by centuries of division. Borders remained, languages and ideologies varied, and beneath the technological triumphs, old rivalries still simmered. The Martian colonies distrusted Earth's central command. Luna's corporate enclaves cared more for profits than politics. Even within the United Terran Council, debates were fierce, and cooperation was often hard-won. But war has a way of erasing pettiness. The moment the first Thal'Zor fleet broke into Sol's system and turned its weapons toward Earth's sky, everything changed. When orbital platforms above Jakarta were vaporized in seconds, when Titan's communication array went dark, when Mars' equatorial trench cities received their first evacuees from outpost collapses, those events broke something, yes, but they also forged something new. Unity born not from trust but from shared threat. The realization hit hard and fast. Either humanity stood together, or it would vanish as scattered ashes, remembered only as a failed species that burned bright and died young. Old rivalries crumbled in the face of extermination. American engineers collaborated with Chinese military command. Russian orbital defense teams trained alongside Kenyan drone pilots. Indian cyber experts worked in real-time with Martian resistance cells to repel incoming jamming fleets. What had once been competition became cohesion. The sheer necessity of survival did what centuries of diplomacy had failed to accomplish. It made humanity one. The United Terran Council, once bureaucratic and largely symbolic, became the heart of a global war machine. It no longer issued recommendations. It gave orders. For the first time in human history, a single governing body was not only recognized but obeyed on every continent and colony. Elections were suspended. Martial law was declared. The chaos of Earth's former politics gave way to a cold, brutal efficiency. But it wasn't tyranny, it was consensus. Everyone understood what was at stake. Unity went beyond governments. Civilians volunteered in droves, not just to fight, but to build, to code, to analyze, to translate alien languages, to transmit messages of hope. Retired scientists returned to work. Teenagers became engineers overnight, assembling sensor arrays from scrap and garbage. Artists and historians worked side by side with physicists, preserving culture while planning countermeasures. Earth's diversity, once a source of discord, became a wellspring of resilience. Perhaps the most remarkable shift was psychological. In the early weeks of the war, the most common phrase on global networks had been, "Why us?" But as the battles dragged on, the question evolved into who else. There was a sense of manifest destiny. If any species had the stubbornness to resist an empire that had subjugated galaxies, it was humanity. This belief wasn't born of arrogance, but of necessity. Hope was weaponized. Each victory, no matter how small, became a symbol of resistance. Each death became a martyrdom, mourned globally, remembered collectively. Cultural unification moved faster than anyone predicted. A new lingua franca emerged, blending English, Mandarin, Swahili, and Martian trade pidgin. Earth's music, once segmented by region and language, fused into a strange, defiant sound, part war chant, part lament, part celebration of survival. Families from disparate continents formed new kinship networks. Online memorials spanned hemispheres and planets. Humanity became not a race or a nationality, but an identity. Even in defeat, the unity held. When New Mumbai fell to orbital bombardment, volunteers from Buenos Aires to New Oslo mobilized. When the Luna core was breached, every orbital station across Earth fired simultaneously in retaliation, coordinated across languages and latitudes with perfect synchronicity. The message was clear: you strike one, you strike all. The Imperium expected a fractured species easy to divide and conquer. What they found instead was a people who had finally, perhaps miraculously, realized they were stronger together. Earth, once a world of 7 billion isolated voices, had become a singular roar, a storm forged in flame, shouting in one voice that it would not kneel, not now, not ever. The war reached a turning point when humanity began to strike back, not just defensively, not just out of desperation, but with purpose, strategy, and terrifying precision. The early months of the conflict had been marked by retreat, ambushes, and costly defenses. But by the second year, everything had changed. Humanity was no longer just surviving the war. It was learning how to win it. The Thal'Zor, once certain of swift victory, now found themselves caught in a conflict unlike any in their long history, a war that didn't follow their rules, respect their hierarchies, or fear their might. Humanity had adapted. Its fleets, once composed of retrofitted civilian vessels and hastily armed transports, evolved into coordinated armadas capable of coordinated strikes deep within enemy space. Shipyards on Mars and in the Jovian moons began producing warships built for asymmetrical combats, smaller, faster, and more versatile than anything the Imperium had expected. These new Terran-class vessels were equipped with adaptive AI systems that could adjust tactics in real time. Unlike the Thal'Zor, whose doctrine emphasized large, deliberate fleet movements, human squadrons moved like hunters, striking hard, disappearing, and striking again from an entirely different vector. Operation Firebreak was the first sign that Earth's counteroffensive was real. In a move deemed impossible by Thal'Zor strategists, a task force of Terran ships pierced the outer rim of the Imperium's supply corridor near the Altari Belt. There, they executed a simultaneous multi-vector attack on 12 supply hubs, crippling logistics for over 90 Imperium fleets. More astonishing than the damage itself was the precision of the strike. Coordinated across multiple time-lagged systems, reliant on quantum, locked communications, and human intuition, the assault lasted only 17 minutes, but its consequences unraveled months of Imperial planning. Other victories followed. On the ice planet Virx Roman 4, human marines, backed by insurgents from 3 alien species, took down a planetary command node through a mix of cyber warfare and guerrilla tactics. On the orbital forges of Dale, Theta, a small Terran team infiltrated a megastructure and ignited its fusion core, sacrificing themselves to disable an entire Imperial fleet assembly. The impact was not just physical, it was symbolic. These victories showed the galaxy that Earth was not just resisting, it was bleeding the Imperium. Equally critical was Earth's mastery of psychological warfare. Human intelligence divisions, working with defectors from Imperium, aligned species, began broadcasting falsified commands, sabotage instructions, and counter propaganda into enemy channels. Confusion spread. Some Thal'Zor captains executed retreat orders they never received. Others found themselves isolated, unable to determine which orders were real. Stories began to circulate among Imperium tales of Terran operatives who could become invisible, of a eye that hijacked minds, of death that came without warning. Whether true or not, fear spread like wildfire. The myth of Earth became more powerful than the weapons it wielded. Then came the moment that solidified Earth's shift from prey to predator, the Battle of Red Halo. Red Halo was an Imperium star fortress, one of the oldest and most fortified structures in known space, said to be invulnerable, unbreachable. Earth sent 6 ships, 6 small, fast, silent. They bypassed the fortress's outer defenses, not by firepower, but by exploiting a flaw in the Imperium's centuries-old command AI. Once inside, a single engineer's virus, encoded in a 21st century Terran melody, disrupted the fortress's power systems and caused a cascading collapse of its internal gravity wells. The entire fortress imploded on itself in under 20 minutes. The galaxy watched the footage in disbelief. From that moment forward, Earth was no longer seen as an underdog. It was seen as a threat. The Thal'Zor Imperium, once so certain of its superiority, began to understand that humanity was not just dangerous. It was evolving in real time. Earth had taken every loss, every scar, every death, and turned it into strategy. The war was no longer just about resistance. It had become a contest of wills, and humanity, against all odds, was proving that it would not just survive. It would win.